I've spent the last several weeks testing and comparing these three interfaces because they each have similarities, whether it be price point or feature set, but most of what you're going to find on YouTube is from diehard fans of one of these interfaces or brands. So I've been doing this as somebody who started out very indifferent to each of these, but now I'm ready to settle it once and for all. These interfaces, of course, are the RME Babyface Pro FS, Universal Audio Twin X Gen 2, and the Antelope Audio Zen Quadro. I'm going to try to cover pretty much everything that can be compared between these interfaces in this video, but I also have some other videos in this series if you want to see more about each individual interface. As we're getting started, make sure and hit that like button and subscribe if you haven't done that yet. Let's dive straight in and hear some audio comparisons between these interfaces. Right now I'm speaking straight into the RME Babyface Pro using my Universal Audio SD1, which is very gain hungry, much like an SM7B. Now I'm speaking through the same setup, but using the Apollo Twin X Gen 2 instead. I often use a very budget-friendly mic booster when using the SD1 just because my older interface definitely needed it. But for these demos, I'm just going straight into each of the interfaces. Now I'm going through the Zen Quadro, otherwise same exact setup as the other interfaces. The Zen Quadro is $300 or so less than the other two interfaces, so let me know how it holds up to your ears. Now let's talk about DSP, because all three of these interfaces give you the ability to utilize effects powered by the interface itself to varying degrees, of course. I'll go ahead and get it out of the way that the RME's DSP feature isn't quite at the level of the other two interfaces. You do get a built-in 3-band EQ for each of your channels, and that is processed by the Babyface Pro. But the software also provides an effects bus with reverb and delay that you can adjust to your liking, but those are not powered by the interface. They're running off of your computer's processing power. It's cool that it's there, but it's not really in the same league as the Zen Quadro or Apollo Twin, so let's move on to those. On the Zen and Apollo interfaces, you of course get a huge library of great sounding effects emulating classic hardware with no noticeable latency. Vintage EQs, preamps, compressors, pretty much anything that you would want to run this way. In my experience, latency hasn't been an issue at all for either of these interfaces while using the DSP stuff. It's all super solid, so let's go ahead and just listen to some side-by-side demos so that you can get a feel for the quality of each of them. Now let's talk about companion software for each of the three interfaces. The Babyface Pro comes with a software called Total Mix, which is very flexible when it comes to routing things for your mains, monitors, effects. It can be pretty complicated when you want it to be. I found the learning curve for Total Mix to be a bit steep compared to the other interfaces, but I've hammered on about that enough in this series. I do like the 3-band EQ for each of the channels in the Total Mix software. It may not be completely necessary for a lot of people, but I find it extremely convenient for it to just be sitting there whenever you happen to need it. I feel that UAD console and the Antelope software are quite similar to each other. Everything seems to make a lot of sense in the way that things are laid out for mixing your monitors, loading effects, or adjusting input gains. In terms of routing, I feel that the Antelope software takes the win between the two, but overall I think I prefer UAD console because there's a bit more you could do with it, and I think it's slightly easier to get around. It's also smoother than the Antelope software, which I found to be just buggy enough to be annoying. Maybe not problematic, but annoying. But comparing all three, I think I prefer UAD console in terms of features and ease of use. By the way, if you want to check out any of these interfaces for yourself, I do have some affiliate links in the description down below. Zounds is a great place to buy gear, and I of course buy gear from Zounds myself, or else I wouldn't be telling you that. If you happen to purchase anything using my links, it is a great way to support this channel without paying any extra money to do so. I'll briefly touch on the build and form factor of these interfaces, which I've touched on a bit in other videos. The Babyface Pro has a very solid build, and with it being bus powered, I could see this being a very reliable grab and go interface for throwing into a backpack and getting a premium tracking experience on the go. I'm not crazy about the layout of everything on this interface. In my opinion, it's kind of ugly and can leave your desk looking extremely unorganized compared to the other interfaces. And hey, maybe your desk isn't organized anyways, in which case that may not matter too much. I would say the Apollo Twin X also feels very solid and premium. Most of the I/O is on the back of the interface, and the button layout is much more appealing in my opinion. And since I brought up travel a minute ago, while the Apollo is small enough to throw into a backpack, you will need to bring the power supply with you in order to do anything with it, since it's not bus powered. Then we have the Zen Quadro, which I feel like is not quite as heavy duty as the other two interfaces, but again, we're talking about a $300 or so price difference, so the Zen can get a pass here. I don't think the Zen Quadro feels terrible, it just doesn't feel quite as nice as the Babyface or the Apollo. The layout on the Zen Quadro is nice and kind of similar to the Apollo Twin. Again, most of the I/O is on the back of the interface with the exception of the headphone jacks and 2 of the inputs. It looks really clean. It doesn't have much of an angle, which may bother you a bit if you're anything like me. Now to a segment I like to call notable standouts, which basically means some notable good or bad things about each of these interfaces. The bad things may not bother you, and the good things you may not care about, but you might. Firstly, the Babyface Pro FS was an absolute terror to get going with my MacBook, but I got it eventually. I've talked about it before in this series, so if you want to hear more about that, you can check out those first couple of videos in the series. On the other hand, you get a deceiving amount of control from the Babyface Pro itself, meaning you can use combinations of buttons to do several things that you may not realize you could do on the interface. So once you learn all of those shortcuts, it can really change the way you operate the interface. Also, the Babyface Pro is the only interface of the 3 to include an ADAT out, which I think is a real shame for the other interfaces. Oh, and it's also the only interface here to include MIDI in and out, so keep that in mind if that's important to you. And here's a fun one. The Zen Quadro has 2 USB ports in it, so one can be your main host where you get all of the various ins and outs of the interface itself, whereas the second USB operates as a 2-in, 2-out interface for a different device, whether it be another computer, a phone, or a tablet. And you can use both devices at the exact same time and use the software to route things from one device to the other, or maybe send a stereo mix to a live stream software on the second device or something like that. It's a pretty cool feature that I hadn't seen on another interface before this point. The Zen Quadro being $300 less than the other 2 interfaces also has more local I/O than its competition. And okay, check this out. This one did a number on me. The UAD console software for the Apollo interfaces natively integrates with Softtube Console 1. So if you're a Console 1 user or you've considered it, this is the icing on top because you can control all of your input gains, monitor levels, and you can even load in Unison plugins and control them straight from the hardware. That is incredibly cool to me. I haven't utilized this next feature yet, but it's great in theory. If you use SonarWorks Sound ID for room correction in your studio, or maybe you've considered it, you can run it in the console software and have it powered by your Apollo. This reminds me a lot of the IK Multimedia ARC room correction system, where they sell a hardware unit to run your room correction on. But with this, Sound ID runs on your interface and doesn't take up any extra space, which is pretty neat. So in the end, which one of these interfaces is truly the best premium compact audio interface? Well, put your guesses in the comments, and while you're doing that, I have a slight confession that I'd like to share with you. I thought that doing this series was just a fun idea and something that people might want to see, but in the back of my mind, I knew that I would want to end up replacing my faithful Audient ID22 with one of these interfaces. Obviously, money is always a factor, and believe it or not, I'm actually pretty good at finding gear that I like and sticking with it for a long time. That being said, I did sell my Audient ID22 and got a new interface based on the results of these videos. So I have 3 categories, which may seem like a cop-out, but truthfully, this is the most accurate and honest way of doing this, coming from my experience with these interfaces, which are much different from one another than I thought they would be. The categories are mainly to help pinpoint who each of these are for, but I'm still going to reveal my own personal winner as well. Category 1, best converters of the bunch, most expandable, and solid for travel, the RME Babyface Pro FS. Of the 3 of these interfaces, this would be the best one for having a solid travel interface while being able to connect via ADAT and have a more involved setup when you get back to the studio. It's bus powered, so if you wanted to do a quick recording on the go with a laptop, it would be so easy. And the Babyface Pro comes with a hard shell case to further protect your expensive piece of gear. All right, category 2, best user experience, best feature set, and the DSP King. You know it's got to go to the Apollo Twin X Gen 2. Everything from the look and feel of the hardware to the sound of the preamps and plugins, all the way down to the UAD console software is well refined and, at least in my experience, is much smoother than the other two interfaces. I came very close to sticking with this interface at the end. In category 3, best value has to go to the Antelope Audio Zen Quadro. My main complaints about the Zen Quadro had to do with the feel of the hardware and the slight bugginess of the software. But the preamps and converters are, I would say, on par with the Apollo Twin X, and you get 4 preamps, it's bus powered, and you get the dual USB feature. You can also do a lot more on the interface itself than the other two interfaces, despite it having the least amount of buttons. I think the software can be refined a bit smoother in the future, but if you can get past that and you can get past the casing that's not quite as solid, this is a great lower budget alternative to the Apollo series. But here's the deal. I did replace my interface as a result of this series, but it wasn't with one of these interfaces. I needed the I/O of the Zen Quadro, the ADAT in and out that's on the Babyface, but the sound, feel, and feature set and the Console 1 integration of the Apollo Twin. So here it is.